What's going on, everyone? It's Adrian from Draft Time, and in my previous video I briefly touched upon stacking, and I got a bunch of emails from people asking me, to further elaborate on stacking and to give them a bunch of different stacking strategies. So I want to dedicate this entire video strictly to stacking, and if you guys like this video, shoot it a thumbs up and also let me know in the comments, or you can email me at support@drafttime.com because I want to make a lot more videos like this. So first of all, what is stacking? Well, stacking is when you take two or more players from the same team and you put them on your fantasy team. So for instance, this weekend is week 1 of the NFL, and you might want to stack the Patriots by taking Tom Brady and Julian Edelman and putting them on your team. So what's the purpose of doing this? Well, every receiving yard that Julian Edelman gets is a passing yard for Tom Brady. Every receiving touchdown that Edelman gets is a passing touchdown for Tom Brady. So when you do this, you're creating a lineup with a lot of upside, because if Julian Edelman has a big game, then it's highly likely that Tom Brady also has a big game. But it also has a big downside, because if either of them have a bad game, then there's a strong chance that the other one also has a bad game. So when should you stack? Well, first and foremost, only stack for baseball and football. Never stack for the NBA. So in football, players' performances are directly related to each other, and I just gave you the quarterback wide receiver example where Tom Brady and Julian Edelman complemented each other. Now, how do players complement each other in baseball? Well, every time a hitter gets an RBI in baseball, that's going to be a run for all of the hitters who are on base. So in that regard, teammates complement each other in baseball. Now in basketball, it's a whole different story. You see, teammates don't actually complement each other in basketball. And I know what you're thinking, player A might throw an assist to player B, and then that means that player A gets the assist and player B gets the bucket, which is true, but that's the only way that teammates complement each other in basketball. In all other aspects, teammates actually do the opposite of complement each other. You see, every shot that player A takes is a shot that player B doesn't have the opportunity to take. Every rebound that player A grabs is a rebound that player B does not grab. Every steal that player A gets is a steal, a block, or a rebound that player B does not get. Now, I know what else you might be thinking. You might be thinking, well, what if a game goes into double or maybe even triple overtime? Then that might be a good time to stack players from both of those teams. Now, while that is true, you're going to find yourself getting into a lot of trouble trying to predict which games go into overtime and stacking players based off of that. As a matter of fact, you might want to consider doing the opposite of stacking if you want to draft a team with a very high upside for basketball, and I'll show you how to do that by using our tool later in this video. So anyways, back to the original question, when should you intentionally stack? Well, we already determined that you only intentionally stack for football and baseball, but also only ever intentionally stack for GPPs. So if you're ever in a 50-50 or a double up or even a triple up for that matter, I do not recommend stacking. But if you're in a quintuple up or a big tournament, that's when it's a good time to stack. But there's a lot more to stacking and stacking strategies, so let's go ahead and take a look at the tool and I'll get more into it. All right, so now we're looking at our FanDuel lineup optimizer, which you can access on drafttime.com, and I want to explain to you the difference between what I like to call an organic stack versus an intentional stack. So an organic stack is when you just run the lineup optimizer normally without any explicit instructions to stack, and one of the top lineups happens to be a stacked lineup. So let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. So let's go ahead and choose the 4 p.m. only slate on Sunday. And the reason why I'm choosing this slate is because I happen to know that this slate provides you with an organic stack, okay? And let's go ahead and run 3 lineups. And as you can see, Mike Evans is highlighted bold. That means that Mike Evans is part of a stacked lineup because he has Jameis Winston as his quarterback throwing to him. So anytime you see a name that's highlighted bold, that indicates that it's a stacked lineup. So this first lineup right here, with Jameis Winston as the quarterback and with Mike Evans as the wide receiver, is what I like to refer to as an organic stack. Now let's go ahead and choose the main slate, and let's go ahead and run 5 lineups, okay? And as you can see, none of these lineups from the main slate generated any sort of organic stack. Okay, so for this, if we want to stack a team, we're going to have to do what's referred to as an intentional stack. And I provided instructions for how to intentionally stack in the previous video, but I'll explain it again. Now, let's suppose that we wanted to stack maybe Patrick Mahomes and one of his receivers, so either Sammy Watkins or Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce. Well, what we could do is we can come over here to KC, click on that, okay, and now we want to say that the minimum players to be stacked from Kansas City is 2, and now it's going to select at least 2 players from Kansas City, okay, and then we hit submit, and now we can hit generate lineups. Now, as you can see, it's still not providing us with the stacked lineup because instead it chose Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. And if you come all the way down here, you'll see that this 4th lineup actually does provide us with a quarterback / wide receiver stack where it chose Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill. Okay, and if you wanted to, and I also explained this in the last video, you can come over here to the optimizer and you can lock in Patrick Mahomes and then run the optimizer to see if it generates any stacked lineups, which it does. And as a matter of fact, if you come over here to this 5th lineup, you'll see that it actually selects Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce in addition to Patrick Mahomes. So that's how you can do an intentional stack by using our lineup optimizer. Now, when it comes to deciding which stacked lineups you want to enter into different tournaments, I'm going to give you a few tips. Tip number 1 is do not reach. What do I mean by do not reach? Well, that means don't go around trying to stack players from a team if the value just isn't there because you think that no one else is going to own these players. Look, there's going to be 24 different teams that play on the main Sunday slate. So if you have any sort of stacked team, chances are that not too many people have the same stack as you. So what's an example of a reach? Well, let's go ahead and let's get rid of the stack for Kansas City by putting it back to 0. And now let's stack the Jets, okay? We'll say that we want a minimum of 2 players to be stacked from the Jets, okay? And also we'll lock in Sam Darnold just to make sure it picks up their quarterback. And now let's run 5 lineups. Now, as you can see, all these lineups actually picked up the Jets defense, so it's not actually doing a wide receiver / quarterback stack, except if you come down here to the 5th lineup, you'll see that it does select Sam Darnold and Jamison Crowder. So this last lineup here, this 5th lineup, is a New York Jets stack. Now take a look at the projected total, 123.5. I want you to remember that number because if you come back to the original non-stacked lineup, okay, you'll see that the total is 128.73. So that's a significant difference from the most optimal lineup. And if you come back to this lineup where we stack the Chiefs, you'll see that the total here is 127.31. So this total right here, 123.5, that's a reach. You don't want to put yourself at a disadvantage just because you're chasing some sort of an obscure lineup that you think no one else is going to have. Okay, now let's get rid of this New York Jets stack by putting that back to 0. And now let's get to my second tip, which is always set the minimum players to be stacked from 1 team to 2 for football. Now, I know it might be tempting to take, maybe a quarterback and 2 of his receivers, but 2 different receivers, or a receiver and a tight end for that matter, they do not complement each other. It's kind of like the example that I gave for basketball. You see, every target that one receiver gets is a target that the other receiver or tight end does not get. So that's why I like to set that to 2. Now, sometimes you might set it to 2 and it actually still picks up 3 guys from the same team, especially if you're doing a smaller slate. So in that case, you could do a stack like that if it's not intentional. Otherwise, you're just reaching. And my third and most important tip for stacking is only enter a stacked lineup into a contest if the projected total is within 2 points of the projected total for the most optimal lineup without a stack. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So the original optimal lineup was 128.73 projected points. This is the top lineup without any stacks or anything. Okay. Now, if you come over here to page 4, this is when we did the Pat Mahomes, or actually Kansas City stack. And you can see that the projected total is 127.31. So this is a case where I would consider entering the stacked lineup into a contest. But if you come over here to page 5, okay, this is the stacked lineup right down here, this lineup number 5. This is the stacked lineup for the Jets, and the projected total is 123.5, which I refer to as a reach. So I would not enter this into any contest. Now, another obvious tip is do not start a defense against your quarterback if you're trying to do a stacked lineup. Another thing you might have to be wary of is starting a quarterback and a running back from the same team, unless the value is absolutely there and you can't pass up the running back. Another tip is, for baseball, I like to stack 3 players from the same team. And obviously, don't select any pitchers that any of your hitters that you select are going up against. And one more thing that I wanted to mention before I end this video, I mentioned that for basketball, a lot of times, if you want to select a team with a very high upside, you'll want to limit the amount of players that could be selected from the same team. And the way you do that is you come down here to max players from one team, and then you could change that to 2. And I like to do that for a lot of the bigger basketball slates, just to enter it into some of the big tournaments, because a lot of the time, no more than 2 players from the same team will have a really, really big game. And this is based off of, a lot of analysis that we did on our end, analyzing the most optimal lineups and the top lineups from the night before, basically reconstructing top lineups and figuring out different trends in these top lineups. So those are pretty much all of my tips for stacking. So go ahead and leave me feedback in the comments. You can email me again. The email is support@drafttime.com, and let me know if you guys have any questions or if I didn't cover something concerning stacking.